Our guest today is Christian Ruf, owner of Uncommon Elite with two other partners. He is an executive recruiting firm that recruits solely out of special forces, former special ops, former intelligence, former Green Berets. He only recruits managers, people that can operate at a very high level that he is placing in the home services industry, landscape firms like yours. What a great story. Both you're going to learn about his background in the military and how he came to executive recruiting. You're going to learn about the background of some of the people he's recruited and really what a high level they operate on. Much smarter and higher level than I would have thought. Of course, it all makes sense when you hear the story, but I just hadn't put two and two together. You're going to love learning about this new resource or new source for recruiting high-level managers that can operate in the complexity of the landscape world. You're going to learn about how the military really prepares these type of leaders to lead within landscape environments, chaotic, complex environments that we have in the landscape and green industry. And you're also going to learn just a very inspiring story here. Let's jump right in. Okay, the next podcast, here we go. Christian Ruf, Uncommon Elite. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Tell the audience about your current business.
So my current business, very high level, we take former special operators and place them in home services, construction, and manufacturing business all throughout the U.S. in key leadership operations roles.
So you take former special ops, and I think you said intelligence
community as well. Yes.
And you place them in high-level positions.
High-level positions. Everything from production manager for a $50 million roofing company to CEO of a $200 million a year building supply company and everything in between.
That is so awesome. And so you must be tied into the community or the X community.
Yes.
How are you tied in? Like, what is there a Facebook page? How does that work?
It's really just amassed connections over the last 15 years. So I have other recruiters that work with me. I've got a team of 5 at this point, one from each different organization: Green Berets, SEALs, Rangers. And so between the 6 of us, our network is pretty deep. There are some private communities, nonprofits, other Slack communities that we have access to talent through, but largely just comes through guys we know in immediate network.
Yeah. I raced with a guy who was in the Seabees. What is that?
Seabees is a function of the Navy that they primarily focus on construction. So it's non-special operations side, conventional, but they do a lot of construction. It'd be like the combat engineers version for the Army, which is just engineering and construction.
That makes sense because he made all his money in home construction afterwards.
Yep, makes sense. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Christian, you've got this recruiting business and you have a niche, and it's and I've seen some of the resumes and they're pretty high level guys.
Yes.
Highly educated, and highly skilled. But let's go back to the origin story. How did you get into this?
Needed a way to pay for college. I needed a way to pay for college. I was at orientation at the University of Vermont and walked by the ROTC building and thought to myself, I always had that intrigue of being in the military, and said I might as well go check it out, try it out. Tried it out first semester, liked it, committed, ended up going to flight school because it looked like a cool thing to do. I really had no idea what it meant to be a pilot, just looked interesting. Got into aviation, was flying Blackhawks, and then I had a commander that came from the special operations world. So organization called the 160th. If you think of the Bin Laden raid or Black Hawk Down, basically any like high profile mission where they crash a helicopter, 160th does it. And highly selective, pull from all around the military, arguably best pilots in the world. And I said, well, that looks cool. I might as well try that as well. Got in, spent 5 years there. And then my last deployment, we made international news, which is never really a good thing. And my wife said, I think you're done. And then fast forward, I got hired to be the integrator for a urgent care business. Got hired to be the number two. We grew the business 2 to 4 locations during COVID. Started doing a little bit of coaching, consulting work with other business owners. And I noticed the same thing. And they had a need for talent. And so I leaned into that. And, this year to date, so far this year, we've done 29 placements across a variety of different businesses, mostly home services, manufacturing. But, it all started with me having a need to pay for college and saying, hey, that looks cool. I might as well try that out. So, and then just doing it a couple more times.
So what did you learn from your armed forces experience, good and bad?
I mean, the number one thing is how to lead. I was 23 years old and had 50 guys who were all older than me and 8 aircraft and responsible for doing stuff all over Europe. And there's no book on how to lead. It was just I walked into the hangar one day and all of a sudden I was in charge. And then I did it again when I was 26, but in the special operations world. So I was able to have a fast track to develop my own leadership style, understand what right looks like as far as operations. I think the biggest thing I learned though was mental resilience. I've been through a lot of situations of high ambiguity, high uncertainty, no roadmap of what to do, nobody there to tell me what to do, usually in a high risk environment, and just having to rely on my best judgment and the objective and just figuring it out. But I think it's an interesting question. You think about what the bad side, the bad side of what I had to unlearn was talking about what I did. So I spent essentially 5 years in a black hole. Family understood that I was doing something. My wife knew that I was doing something a little bit different. Didn't really have exact context onto what that meant or the severity of it. And that's just largely because of the profile of the things that we did. You don't really talk about what you do or the things you're doing. And it took me about 3 years to unlearn that. And the result of me unlearning that is where I am today, because I was able to draw attention to the type of individuals that I work with. I would say that's there's a need for quiet professionalism, but it can be a detriment.
So I just want to repeat what you're saying here. So in your role in the armed forces, it's kind of like these spy movies where you can't tell your spouse what you're doing. Your wife knew what you did, but that's it, right?
She knew I flew a Black Hawk that had a lot of guns on it. That was it. And then she knew that every once in a while, usually every quarter, I would get a text message in the middle of the night, and I would disappear to the hangar, and I would either come home the next day or I wouldn't come home the next day.
So why do they do that? Is it practice, or is it to keep things off guard, or?
No, it's largely just because the mission. So we worked with 2 organizations that are basically the on-call for anything that happens in the world. So if it's a hostage rescue, high-value target, embassy evacuation, going to gather some specific type of intel to interdict, the White House essentially presses a button and we disappear to wherever that is.
Yeah.
So it's usually a couple times a year something like that happens. The one of note that I could talk about because it made public attention, it's all in the media, the Baghdadi raid. So when they went after the leader of ISIS, Baghdadi, that was very much a, press a button, guys disappear. I actually missed that because I had taken a day off and was doing landscaping at the house we just moved into. So I had my phone inside and I missed the text message. And as a result, my buddy Shane took my spot on it, which proved to be a very high profile event. So yeah, I'm my guys still don't let me live that one down.
So, all right. So you learned leadership from this. What did you learn? Did you learn anything that helped you become this niche recruiter that you've become?
Outside of the talent, I would say the beers figured out just the raw, and we would get an objective, we would get some left and right limits, and then they would say go. And sometimes that meant you put your aircraft in the back of a C-17 and you land in some country in Africa with like 30 days worth of fuel and ammo, and there's no one there to tell you what to do, and you just have to figure it out. And so a lot of what I'm doing right now is, I've had clients reach out to me and say, hey, can you find me someone with a special operations background who's an accountant? And to me, I'm like, a Navy SEAL that's an accountant? I'm not quite sure that exists, but I'm not going to say no. Turns out I found a Navy SEAL that's accountant and 2 Green Berets Special Forces that are accountants, all of which were accountants before they went to the service. They had the calling, they felt the need to go. And so I think the thing I've taken the most outside of the raw leadership is just figure it out.
How much of that is genetic and how much is taught and how much is learned figure it out?
I think you have to have a baseline of it. I think you have to have a baseline of it. Not everybody has it. And then I think there's a heavy confidence component of when you've done it enough times, you have the confidence yourself to say like, oh, yeah, well, I'm just going to figure it out. I have before. I mean, there are times where you come into work and it just seems like a casual Monday, and then all of a sudden you're deploying 4 different sets of aircraft all around the world, and you don't have enough aircraft, but the aircraft have to go. And so you're just, there really is no other option. And so I think that there is this learned practice iteration of, all right, I just need to understand what's the objective, what's the intent behind it, what are the resources that I need, what is the minimum viable information I need to get started? And then instead of waiting for a 100% plan, just get started and figure it out along the way.
I bet you have an acronym for that, huh? MVI?
MVI. Yeah. Minimum viable information. Sure. Yeah. I kind of have 2 around there, like minimum viable information and then minimum viable energy.
Okay. So when you're in training, are you constantly getting trained for more and more complex things that you just have to go figure out?
Yes. They start with like very baseline. Within the special operations community, they start with a very what are the fundamentals? And you have to show up and master the basics. So example would be, I had 400 flight hours when I got to that organization, and my peers had 3,000, 4,000. We all started back at how do you hover an aircraft? Like, how do you hover an aircraft at 10 feet during the day with no drift? And then you do, how do I do it at 50 feet? And then you do it 10, 50 feet at night. And then you do it 10, 50 feet at night in dust. And then 10, 50 feet at night in dust in between wires where, people could be shooting at you. And so it all starts with understand the basics, master them. And if you can do that, then you start incrementally adding in variables that make it more difficult. And so the same would be with a mission. We'd have missions where you have cross borders, you're putting helicopters in the back of C-17s to go land somewhere and under the cover of darkness, put everything back together and take off. You have aerial refueling, you have landing in the desert and pulling out a Honda generator to suck gas out of another helicopter. So it does quickly have a high level complexity, but where they start you is like, can you master the fundamentals?
So let's get to the recruit. I'm thinking, man, that would be a great guy to have, or woman. How many are women, by the way?
I've done a couple. I've done 3 at this point. Females in special operations is still a new thing. We had We had female pilots who absolutely crushed it. There were four when I was there, and they're absolutely phenomenal. So it's still a newer thing.
I'm thinking that the skill of figure it out would be a great skill to have of an employee. I mean, of any level, absolutely any level.
Yeah.
I was just talking with one of my clients, we're texting, how they can't find kids anymore that are able to figure things out. And I was saying, when we grew up, me, him, we all worked on our own cars. Now that's hard to do, by the way, on a newer car. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, God, we just did things that A, you don't do, and B, it'd be hard to do. It's almost, I told them a core skill in high school should be rebuild an engine.
Yeah.
Just get your hands dirty, learn how to do something like that. That should be for everybody in high school, just to learn how to do.
Yeah. Agreed.
So what, besides just figuring it out, what other skills do your recruits come with that are, I guess, either unique or, if not unique, at least still highly valuable?
Seeing through chaos. Chaos is often just an absence of rhythm and process. And so if I think back to my most chaotic night, if you will, we were going after a guy, and the whole thing just went sideways, like basically the second we took off, but we still had to go get the guy. And so things became seemingly chaotic. Lots of different things going on the ground, lots of explosions everywhere, lots of shooting, people running in every which direction. We're overhead providing coverage for the guys on the ground, but also seemingly having to take a look at the world around us, stay glued. And so to the untrained, that would come across as very chaotic, but to us, everything has a process, everything has a rhythm, and you stick to your process and you stick to your rhythm. And now, you're fighting the problem and not the emotion. And when I look at some of the guys that we place in these companies, like they've been in more chaos than I have. Some of these SEAL Team 6 operators that we put in businesses, like those guys are intimately familiar at a very close level with what chaos is. But it's that ability to recognize, all right, like despite not having all the information and the environment throwing a lot at me, how do I rely on the fundamentals? How do I think back to our processes we've been trained on and then execute on contingencies? So I think small business is chaotic. There's no rules to it. You come into the office one day and it's one thing, and the next day it's entirely different and undoes all the work that you did the first day. And so when I think about the guys that we're putting in, like they can pivot quickly, understand the intent, and despite what the environment's throwing at them, like make decisions based off of training, SOPs, and sound judgment.
Okay. Let me keep asking. What's another skill, unique skill they come with, or just a good skill?
Assessing talent.
Tell me more.
Getting into those organizations is an attribute-driven assessment. So SEALs have BUDS, which most people have seen what BUDS look like, Hell Week, that sort of thing. SEAL Team 6 has a different layer of it. 160th has their own assessment process. Green Berets have like almost a 2-year process. Everybody has a different process by which someone is evaluated and brought into the organization, and it's driven by attributes, not experience. I finished last in my flight school class, and I got into the organization I did because they saw something about me that they liked and was congruent with their culture and the mindset that they needed. And so these guys have gone through that process themselves and then seen others come through that process and witness the power that is attributes over experience. And that's what makes my job a lot of fun, is between me and my recruiters, like we if somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, I need somebody to run this $30 million HVAC business, I go and find the guy that has those raw attributes, talent, some of the financial acumen, and maybe some of the industry experience. But I can confidently put them in front of them and say, like, this guy's going to crush it for you because he can learn HVAC. So that ability to look through a person and past what's just on the resume and equip that business owner that they're working with a, hey, like, you may be looking for somebody who has 10 years of landscaping experience, but what about if you considered somebody who can just come in, learn the industry, but has the heavy operational mindset that you actually need?
And you're saying that these recruits themselves are good at judging other talent?
Yep. Because in those organizations, that's part of what you do. So I came in, got in, and then within 2 years, I was looking at and assessing the people that we were trying to bring in the organization. So it's this internal selection process of like, if somebody's going to come into our tribe, we want to make sure they're a good fit for our tribe.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. I wouldn't have guessed that. I'm going to keep asking till you run out of answers. What's another unique or powerful skill that they come with?
Planning. You're familiar with EOS traction, and I'm sure many of your audiences. That's how the military runs. It's the same way.
Yeah.
And if you narrow it down to the special operations community, we had annual goals, we had quarterly goals. We evaluate our talent based off of our core behaviors that we needed to have in the organization. We evaluate them based off of performance of, are they actually doing the job? We had a scorecard. This scorecard was tied to the health of the aircraft, the amount that we were flying, whether we were below or above flying, and then looking in the pipeline of like what's coming towards us that we need to get ahead of or prepare using those leading indicators. And so planning is something that these guys do well. The 160th organization I came from is notorious for how detailed they get, because our commitment to our customer is anywhere in the world plus or minus 30 seconds. And that's not plus or minus 31 seconds. It's not plus or minus 32 seconds. It's plus or minus 30 seconds. So the amount of detail that goes into planning that and showing up on time to that level of commitment is, we would spend 3 weeks planning a mission that's 8 hours long.
Yeah. Okay. This is good. Is there another skill? I'm ready to move on past that question, unless you have one more.
To look cool. How about that? They know how to look cool. No, that pretty much, that covers a lot of what companies come to us needing.
So. If I were to use my imagination and just sort of stereotype, I might, and I'm going to go negative here just for a second.
Please.
I might think, man, they're going to be too intense, and they're either going to be physically or verbally abusive. I'm making this up.
No. You're not though. It's a real stereotype.
And so, is it true? Is it true at maybe a lower level, but not at the higher level? Like what?
I would say that it is true to a degree in the conventional side of the military. But within the special operations community, if you show up and try to bark orders, or you show up and try to command authority without like getting respect and buy-in, or if you come in like strict and rigid, that is the fastest way to get kicked out. And I've seen it happen where some officer type comes in who, got through the assessment process somehow, but, is acting, based off of like where they went to school and all the accolades they have. And then they go bye-bye real quick. And then on the other side, like I would, and this is common because there is that, if you look at David Goggins and Jocko Willink, like those are very strong personalities, and they've done great things for the community and helping bring attention to it. But those are very strong personalities that are atypical for what you would find. I would describe it as if you walked into a room with a bunch of 160th pilots and a couple ground operators, you would just think that they're a group of like pretty decently fit dudes hanging out,
Okay.
wearing a lot of Saltman shoes and cool pants and, polos. But other than that, like personality, normal dudes.
What are some weaknesses? I mean, this all sounds great, and it does. Give one or two weaknesses that. I mean, there's always weaknesses when you're recruiting somebody you don't know. Always, right?
Always.
Any specific weaknesses that show up from this pool?
Generally depends on the situation. So if it's a more senior level role where they need to have a high degree of financial acumen, that sometimes they don't. I did not. I didn't know how to spell P&L, and then I was thrust into an opportunity where like I had to learn. I think when I look at some of the guys, and frankly, like when I look at myself, my greatest weakness is I can move too fast. Like I'll see something and I'll just act on it, and I need to be recalibrated of like, okay, what's actually the overall objective, and do I need to communicate things better to my team instead of just like jumping in and like, I'll talk to you guys later. So I would say, like, for me, that's certainly a weakness I see in myself. I do see it in some of the candidates that we place.
Yeah.
And that is part of the shift of, all right, you're going from this very type A driven environment where you're surrounded by type A driven people to now an organization where maybe only 5% are like that. And so
even your enemies are type A driven, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And now you're going into a small business where the only other type A driven person is probably the business owner. So how do you,
or a couple people, but not everybody.
Yeah. Right. And so there's definitely a learning component of like slowing down.
Christian, I do think your definition of type A probably is a capital A that's very large. It's probably different from my definition of type A, but I got you.
I don't know. I don't know though, because, and I get asked this question. Oh wow, like combat must have been really stressful and chaotic. And honestly, I think small business is more stressful. In combat, you are surrounded by a tribe. You're surrounded by your peers who all possess, especially in this community, the same personality traits. And then when the enemy does something to you, it's very simple what you're supposed to do back.
Yeah.
And it's right there written in front of you. But in small business, you're often alone and unafraid. You have a team, but you're the one making the decisions.
Yeah.
And the solution to the problem isn't just shooting back.
Something I want to say that I think will be a benefit to you in terms of the weakness you just said.
Yeah.
I think all onboarding of highly skilled people, type A's, or anybody you would say, hey, that's an A player, right? Let me say that. I actually think they all need more onboarding, not less, for the exact reason you just said, because a very skilled, driven person will take off in whatever direction they think, unless you spend a lot of time with them up front. And so even before this conversation, I've always said that. And so I think that weakness that you're describing really is the weakness of a highly skilled person, that the company that's the hiring company should just be sure to have a thoughtful onboarding process and plan to spend the time with them.
Expectations and direction.
Yep. So that's a good message for anybody here listening. When you're hiring somebody who's higher skilled, it doesn't mean set it and forget it, because you don't know what direction they're going to head in, and they're going to go fast in that direction.
Yeah. It brings up another observation is Our onboarding process was 36 months.
Hmm.
The day you started, you had 12 months of like initial, like get to that baseline level, and then another 18 to 24 months of getting to that advanced level. And your sole purpose in life was to follow the plan.
Yeah.
And it was laid out of like at 24 months past your like show up at the unit date, you need to be here. And if you're not here, then we have to talk about you leaving. And then all the steps and skills and experiences and qualifications you needed to get to that point, it was very, very defined so that we could take type A dude and basically pump them through a machine
Yep.
to get the result that we needed.
36-month onboarding.
Yep.
That is mind bending.
It is. And it has about I'd have to fact check myself on this. It's over 90% success rate. And it's just because of the quality of the training.
I mean, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's just mind bending when you think about it in a business setting.
Yeah. It doesn't. I don't. Please don't do a 36-month onboarding process.
No. But what it means is your recruits will respect whatever onboarding process the hiring company wants to go through.
Yep. I generally ask in a conversation when someone's interested in using our services is 6 months from the day of the hire, what is your expectation of this individual? And are you planned to get them there? And that helps me inform, okay, if they're looking at somebody, they're often, we're humans, we're short-sighted. We look at somebody through the lens of like, can they do what I want them to do now? But where they need to think is, can this person get to where I need them to be 6 to 12 months from now to drive the impact in the business? And so that's why I ask of like, all right, like what you see in this person, do they have the tenacity, urgency, attitude, and aptitude to get to where you need them to be in 6 months? Are those expectations clear? And are you prepared to set them up for that pathway?
How many of your clients are actually prepared for that?
50%.
50? Okay. That's pretty high. I mean, I guess that's
It's generally the bigger ones. Generally like the PE-backed HVAC or roofing company that they have a playbook. Smaller business side, like 10 million and below. I've seen it, but it's seldom.
Yeah. And you're working with Anthony, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Anthony's he has so far a good onboarding plan, and he's very impressed with the person that you placed there.
That was one.
Yeah. What are some of the negative feedbacks you get from your placements? They call you up 6 months down the road and they're like, "Oh my God." What do they say?
Well, there's one in particular that stands out. The first one we did, and it was a turnaround, but nobody knew it was a turnaround. And we're still he and I are still very, very. We actually became very close through that because I was helping him along the way, just sharing some of the best practices I had implementing US and all that stuff. And for him, this is a SEAL Team 6 operator. Dude spent 20 years in SEAL Team 6 as a sniper team leader, and he's executing a turnaround in a large business and calling me up and be like, "Man, what did you do, Chris? Why did you put me here?" He didn't say that exactly, but I would say overall feedback, what surprises them is, especially if they're just coming out, the difference between working with their peers previously and working with a non-special operations team. And not so much when they don't like it, but how they have to shift their approach.
So if I'm interviewing one of your recruits and I'm their first civil job, I wonder.
Yeah.
Then we should take even a little more time in the interview process to
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, generally what I recommend is bring these guys up and put them to work for a day or two.
Okay.
We had one a commercial lighting business in Columbia, South Carolina, smaller business. They wanted somebody to come and run it, grow it. I found him similar to what I found, basically spitting image of what I found for Anthony, 20-year Green Beret and no post-military experience. And so they put him through a series of like projects to test like how he thinks about things, how he would go and grow the business. And then I had to come up and work with the techs for 2 days. And they got the feed.
Before they hired him, they put him to work.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. For how many days? 2 days or
2 days? Yeah.
That's not much.
Yeah.
Is it fair to assume that your recruits are willing to travel, or are they done with travel?
I haven't had, the only time I've had someone who like wouldn't move for a role is because they were settled with family and kids in high school. But outside of that, we've had guys move all across the country. I mean, Anthony's guy moved from Destin, Florida to New York.
Destin, he's probably bored.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. Destin's beautiful, but
That's great. So, and then we've had other guys, Virginia to Florida and Texas to Detroit. So pretty flexible.
Yeah. Do you work in Canada?
Not yet. I mean, I'll work anywhere. That's sort of like the I'll figure it out thing.
Can you? Yeah. Does your network extend into Canada?
Could find somebody, sure. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
How many might be bilingual, Spanish and English?
Surprising amount, actually. And I think about the Special Forces Green Beret guys. It's a requirement that they learn a different language, and a lot of them, they basically cover 3 different theaters: South America, Europe, and the Pacific, if I remember correctly. So yeah, a lot of bilingual candidates.
Okay. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, give us the deets.
Best way to reach out to me is either you can find me on LinkedIn, find me on Twitter, or websites uncommonelite.com. Those are generally the easiest way to do it.
All right. LinkedIn, Twitter, you said uncommonelite.com.
Yes, sir.
Is there a season that's the best season? And I'm sure you can say the answer is no, but I'm asking anyways.
I don't know, because I just keep getting roles consistently every week. So I would say, I think generally, if people with families are going to move, they want to move in the summertime.
Move in the summer. All right. That's a good thought. That's a good answer.
Kids in school, sort of thing.
I guess what I'm asking is, do people come out of the military at a certain season or not really?
Not really. No.
Okay. But if someone's going to move, they want to move and get settled before the school year. That's a good thought.
Yeah.
Were you just written up in Forbes?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. One of my clients had a connection there, and they reached out, thought it was a compelling story, and so that went out early this fall.
Yeah. Neat. What do you do for fun and relaxation?
Well, I used to do landscaping. Really enjoyed that, and then my wife fired me from that. And a boat. I'm in Hilton Head, so you have a car. I have an old car and a new boat, and so we go out on boat all the time.
Okay. Very good. Any final thoughts or words to the people listening here are in the green industry, and I'm sure there's others in other adjacent industries listening as well. This podcast goes all over North America, but I mean, as I've told people before, I've gotten hired for work in New Zealand based on people hearing this podcast. Can you work in New Zealand?
I'll work anywhere. I'll figure it out, man. Like I'll never say no. So I'll figure it out. I think this thing I would say is, most people come to us because they want to hire military, and the military is certainly, sure, it's a good, What it really means to me is like they have a set of attributes that make them successful. And so whether you're going to hire military or you're not going to hire military, or whether you're looking at somebody you want to bring on your team now, the further you can get into the attributes that make up a person, the more successful you'll be.
Okay. Christian, I'm sure you're going to get some calls from this, and I really do appreciate your time here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it a lot as well.